Bless thou joy of loving. No, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Jesus, thou joy of loving hearts, thou fount of life, thou light of men, from the bliss which earth imparts, we turn unfilled to thee again.
The truth unchanged and ever stood, thou savest those that on thee call. To them that seek thee, oh, how good! To them that find thee, all in all.
Good morning. Good morning. This week has gone very, very fast. Turn with me in your Bible, Deuteronomy chapter 6. When we're done, I'd like to look at one more thing here in this passage. And when we're finished with this, I'd like to open it up to you before we get into the topic for today. If you have a testimony or something to share from the week, something that God has spoken to you, I'd like to hear it. So Deuteronomy chapter 6, let's read these verses again, beginning at verse 5. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thine heart, with all thy soul, with all thy might. And these words which I command thee this day shall be in thine heart. And thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children, and shalt talk of them when thou sittest in thine house, when thou walkest by the way, and when thou liest down, and when thou risest up. And thou shalt bind them for a sign upon thine hand, and they shall be as frontlets between thine eyes, and thou shalt write them upon the posts of thy house and on thy gates. Stop reading there again. The very last verse that we looked at here in verse 9 is the same message as verse 8 of remembering, but instead of binding them on our hands and putting them as frontlets between our eyes, this time that's a personal thing we need to remember. This one is for our families. Put them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. So I don't have a lot of comments on this other than to me this is speaking of the testimony of the home. What kind of a testimony does your home have? And is it that safe place of intentional instruction that God is asking us to have? So that's my challenge that I leave with you from these verses, that your home is a safe place of intentional instruction. Instructing and teaching by word and by example. First of all, and mostly to love God with all of our hearts, and then the rest of our lives will flow out of that. All right, it's your turn. What do you have to share this morning before we get into the last topic?
You just use the word intentional, and that's something that's kind of challenged me this week, is to be a little more intentional when it comes to leading family devotions, training children, and just encouragement.
I wish I could remember something more profound, but there was a verse you had read early on.
There hasn't been a lot of profound thoughts coming out here, so go ahead.
Yeah. And you shall be like a still small voice behind you saying, this is the way. I like that.
From Isaiah, yep.
Well, I was impressed with this profound thought from you, that we don't need to see the whole picture. We don't want to know the future. I was like, yeah, I want to know the future. And then you said no. And the more I thought about it, then you explained it, like, I just wrote down, God in his mercy will give you what you need to know. If we did know it, we'd try so hard to change it. And I was like, wow, yeah, that's the truth, so. God gives us what we need to know, and then trust him.
I think what you showed yesterday about those jumping to conclusions, how they did that, and I'm a pro at that. And I jump to conclusions like nobody else. And then 99% of the time I'm wrong, or often wrong. So that was a challenge to me to not jump to conclusions about people or circumstances or whatever. But just, like you said, there's always something you don't forget. There's always something you don't know or something going on you don't know.
Anyone else?
I was personally blessed and challenged with your thoughts and questions you asked about recreation. It was really challenging to ask questions and forced me to look into my own life and think, is this really what I should be doing? Is this a help or a hindrance? And it ended up that way.
All right, well, I'd like to look at another subject this morning referring to, or relating to communication again. There was once, many years ago, there was a lady who started a rumor about her pastor that was extremely damaging to his character. It destroyed a lot of things in his life. And the church blew apart, and it was just not good. And as she was dying, she was on her deathbed, and I guess this had bothered her for many years, and she confessed. She said, her minister was there, the pastor was there with her, the one that she had destroyed his character. He was sitting there with her as she was dying. She confessed. She said, I made that up. It wasn't true. Will you please forgive me? And she recovered. Actually, she wasn't dying. She recovered, and she came back again and said, would you please forgive me? He said, of course I'll forgive you if you will do something for me. She said, anything. I'll do anything. She felt awful. He said, I want you to go home, and I want you to kill a black hen, pluck all of its feathers, and bring them back to me in a basket. She said, well, that's strange, but I'll do it. So she went home, killed the black hen, brought back all the feathers in this basket. She said, now, I want you to take that basket of feathers, and I want you to go through the town, and at every crossroads, take a handful out and just sprinkle them. And if there's any left, go to the top of the bell tower and just throw the rest out and let the wind carry them away. Certainly. So she did that and came back to, now what? She said, now I want you to go and collect every single one of them. Collect every single feather. She said, well, I can't do that. They're gone. They're long gone. He said, exactly. He said, that I will forgive you, but just, I want you to remember, that's what your words have done. The words that you said about me and my character, they're gone. You can't do anything. You can't take them back. You can't bring them back. There's no recovery. Is that a good way to end the story? And that's the end of the story. Proverbs 13 verse 3 said, he that keepeth his mouth keepeth his life, but he that openeth wide his lips shall have destruction. Can any of you relate to that verse? Have any of you had your words get you into trouble? I am so prone to this, and it's awful, where I'm talking to somebody about someone else, and they're right here. The person that I'm talking about ends up standing right behind me. Did that ever happen to any of you? That happens to me so often, and you think I've learned, don't talk about other people. Adam Clark says, the government of the tongue is a rare but useful talent. We all got in our by not controlling what we say or not being prudent in how we communicate, either in what we say or what we write. We've all said things we regret later. We've all probably been hurt by the words of other people, and I'm sure we've all hurt people by the words we've said. Sometimes something is said and we respond or we react. We say things harshly. We say things rashly. Many times these responses escalate into something they would not need to be. Like we mentioned yesterday, we assume things, we jump to conclusions, we make assumptions. But the bottom line is this: what we say really, really matters. The words we say really, really matter. This morning I'd like to look at communication. The words we say, maybe how they're said. But I'd mainly be looking at spoken and written communication. The other thing, maybe on a humorous line that can get us into trouble, is how many of you husbands have sent a text to your wife or a WhatsApp message or something to your wife, and you hit send and you think, oh, I hope that went to her. Does that ever happen? I've done that. Or I've sent a message to, I've sent a message to somebody else that would make absolutely no sense because it went to the wrong person. That usually doesn't get us into too much trouble, but it's an illustration of communication can get us into trouble. So these statistics are a little bit old, a few years old, but as of 2018, actually, first of all, how many of you send or receive emails on a regular basis? That's what I thought. It's not so much over here, but I would say business, and as you get older, it's not an outdated form of communication, just so you know. It's not. But as of 2018, there were 281 billion emails sent in one day. Every 60 seconds, there's 510 comments posted on Facebook. There's almost 6,000 tweets per second. This is only those things. This doesn't include any other forms of social media, just these ones I've mentioned. Emerson Eggerichs asked this question. He said, would it be safe to say that out of the hundreds of billions of communications each day, large numbers of people wish they had taken the time to think more carefully about all they were communicating and revised or even deleted entirely the messages they sent out recklessly in an emotional moment? I would say yes. People wish they could redo some of the things they've said or some of the messages they've sent. I'm sure this is not news to you, but how something is said is just as important as what is actually said. There's actually a scriptural basis for this. Did you know that? 1 Corinthians 13, though I speak with the tongues of men and angels and have not charity, I have become as a sounding brass or tinkling cymbal. I can say something, but if I don't say it with love, it's useless. When we talk, the importance of the way we say things, like our tone of voice, our attitude, even our body language speaks a lot. There's been studies done. Does anybody know this, or would anyone like to guess what % of communication is in the spoken word? The words we speak, what percentage of that is?
10%.
How much?
10%.
Any other guesses? 50?
20.
20? It's 7. 7% of what you communicate is through your words. All the rest of it is in body language, tone of voice, volume. You can express intensity by volume, by moving your hands, by how you're standing, by how high your eyebrows are. All of that is communicating something. I could stand up here and just say something. But I say a lot more with volume and with hand motions and with your eyes and inflection, and all of these things speak 93% of what we're trying to say. Husbands and wives, you can communicate a lot to each other without saying anything. I could look at my wife and go, or I could go. And she, depending what the context is, she'll either wither or she'll look at me and say, "What?" And I didn't say anything, right? There's a lot of things you can communicate that's not verbal. But the world is full of communicating and talking, and speaking and sending messages. Politician, how would you like to be a politician and have news cameras on you, or the media analyzing every single thing you do? That would be a nightmare. In more ways than just that, but just, they look at everything you do, and then they go and they broadcast to the world what you actually did, whether you did or not. Just based on your body language and the words you said or didn't say, or should have said, they wish you would have said and didn't say, or what. Or, how many of you know these people that post things, just controversial things, just to get a reaction from people? I have so little time for that. It's so unproductive. He that keepeth his mouth keepeth his life, and he that openeth wide his lips shall have destruction. I forgot to mention, this should go without saying. As we go through this morning, I would like to hear your comments or your thoughts or your questions. So just feel free to interrupt. I'll try to give time for comments as we go. But so many problems in life could be avoided if we would just stop and think before we speak. All right, any thoughts before we keep going? There's another aspect of this. In some ways, or in many ways, we need to be more careful with the words that we write, with messages that we send, words that we write, letters we send, emails we send, texts that we send. Be more careful with that, even than in our verbal communication, because you would, true or false, you would text something to somebody you wouldn't say to their face. You'd be more likely to text something to someone than you would say to your face. You wouldn't. Can any of you relate to that? You would text something or email something, or if you're upset about something and you're responding to them in some written form, you would say things in that you wouldn't have the guts to say to their face. Is that not true? Can you relate to that? Do you know why that is? Because of one thing that's called invisibility. John Solar said this: the opportunity to be physically invisible amplifies the disinhibition effect. Seeing a frown, a shaking head, a sigh, a bored expression, and many other subtle and not so subtle signs of disapproval or indifference can inhibit what people are willing to express. So this invisibility makes us much more likely to say things or write things that we wish we wouldn't. And here's where young people, you'll probably call me a stick in the mud, but this is where I would really caution you to be extremely disciplined if you're dating. In texting or WhatsApp or whatever you're communicating non-verbally, be very careful. You're so much more likely to show vulnerability or a deep level of something that needs time to develop and needs personal involvement to develop. Or something to be shared in person to get the true meaning, rather than just sending a text or a message. We're much more likely to send something in written form than we would talking, which can be a good thing then. When's the last time you gave your wife a card? You don't need to respond because I see some hesitancy. But cards say things that you would either feel really sappy saying, or you, but you need it, right? You need what it says, so give your wife a card.
If you want to go old school, drop it in the mail and mail it to her.
That's a good idea. I just got some raised eyebrows up. Some nonverbal communication. And I know what they meant. I'd like to give you 3 things this morning. 3 simple things to consider as you're communicating. Number 1, is what I'm about to communicate true? Is what I'm going to communicate true? There's 3 verses I'd like to read. Just listen closely. Ephesians 4:25. Wherefore, putting away lying, speak every man truth with his neighbor, for we are members one of another. Proverbs 12 says, lying lips are an abomination to the Lord, but they that deal truly are his delight. Proverbs 19. False witness shall not be unpunished, and he that speaketh lies shall not escape. So test number 1 is what I'm about to communicate, is it true? It may be a good story, it may be a good rumor, it might make you look good. Did you ever really look deep down inside and see how many things you communicate to other people, even subtly, to make yourself look good, or not make yourself look bad? 2 things that will keep you speaking the truth are humility and transparency. And I know they might not seem that connected, but you cannot speak untruth if you're true, if you're humble, and if you're transparent. So why would we not communicate what is true? I'd like to hear from you. Why would you not communicate? What would be some of our motivation to not communicate what is true?
Cast a bad light on our motives.
What about this? There's a couple examples that I thought of fairly quickly, and you can maybe think of some as well, in the Bible, of people that didn't communicate, they weren't necessarily lying. What they said might have been factually true, but the intent was certainly to mislead. And if your intention is to mislead, that's still not true. That's not being truthful in your communication. The first one I thought of was Cain. And God asked him a question. The Lord said to Cain, where is Abel thy brother? And what was his response? What was Cain's response to that question? Am I my brother's keeper? Was he lying? No, he wasn't lying. He was telling the truth. He was kind of snarky about it, but he was telling the truth. But in a silly way, he was trying to mislead God. He wasn't answering the question in a truthful way. Another one I thought of was Abraham. Abraham went to Egypt, and he was afraid that the king would take his beautiful wife, and the Pharaoh would take his beautiful wife. So what did he tell his wife to say? What was that?
That you're my sister.
Yeah, tell everybody you're my sister, because he was afraid if they said, oh, that beautiful woman, I'm going to kill him and take her for my wife, right? That's what he was afraid of. Did he lie? Did he tell an untruth? Or did he tell her to tell an untruth? No. Sarah was his half-sister. So what he said was factually true, but 100% misleading. It was untrue. Here's another great one. This one maybe could apply to parents. So Gehazi and Elisha, he went out to get these gifts from Naaman, and he came back, and you remember what, okay, was it Elisha or Elijah?
Elisha?
It was Elisha, right?
Yeah,
What did he ask Gehazi when he came back?
we didn't ask him where he was.
Yeah, he said, where were you? And what was his response? Yeah, nowhere. I was nowhere. And that's what I mean, it should apply to parents. When your children respond, oh, nothing, that you probably need to investigate a little more. That's such a childish response, and it was untrue, because you're always somewhere. But it was totally meant to mislead. His response, yeah, I was nowhere, just don't worry about it, seems to be his motivated response. So that was untrue as well. But in each of these examples, these three examples I gave, and you can maybe think of more, they all answered in a way to protect themselves, in an untrue way, simply to protect themselves. And none of those examples had transparency or humility. So what you say might be factually true, but it can be very misleading. In the 1800s, there was a young African slave on the auction block, and before the bidding, a bidder approached him and came right up to him, right in his face, and he said, if I buy you, will you be honest? The young African replied, he said, I'll be honest whether you buy me or not. But that is the way to live. Doesn't matter what happens. We will be honest, we will be transparent, and we will be true. Any thoughts? Here's a sobering thing about untrue communication or untrue misleading things is it is a reflection of our heart, and that might seem like a strong statement. But there's a verse, and you all know it. It says, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaketh. And this has spoken to me a lot. How revealing my words are of the condition of my heart. The abundance, or out of the overflow of the heart. So you might think, well, the way they acted toward me, that's why I responded the way I did. That's not true. You responded the way you did because of what's already in your heart. It's overflowing in your heart, and that's why you responded the way you did. So what you put in there before will affect the response that you have later. It's a heart condition. Matthew 12, O generation of vipers, how can ye being evil speak good things? For out of the abundance, or out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaketh. And then a few verses later, it says, for thy words thou shalt be justified, and by thy words thou shalt be condemned.
Maybe Job is another illustration of being part of the truth and you not throw a fig when you asked by God for comments out that going to and fro in the earth. You're not doing that.
What he said was true, but he was holding back. Absolutely.
I agree, but there's a couple stories that I always wrestle with this thing, and one is where God tells Samuel to go anoint David king, and that is the purpose for going. And Samuel's like, if I go, my head's coming off. I cannot go. And give that reason. So God says, okay, don't say that, but just say you're going to have a get together with the other guys. And then while you're there, do the real thing you come for, and then anoint the king. And I was wrestling with that, like, that's not why he's there, but God gave him an excuse. So it can't be wrong, but God can't do that either. And also, and it might vary in what translation you use, but Jesus after he'd been down in Jerusalem, they almost got stoned or killed or whatever, and so they were up back north, wherever it was, and we're going back down, but he wanted to go back down, and he tells them, they're like, well, you can't go back down there because you're going to get killed. And he's like, okay, never mind, I'm not going back down, you guys can go. But then he had full intention of going back down there. And those two are sort of been ones that I always wrestle with that, because it's like, what was really being communicated there? And maybe we just don't know, but it sure seems like the word is almost giving being a little bit deceptive.
Okay, no more questions. Those are very good examples. Does anyone have any insight on that?
I don't either, but it was interesting to read through Brother Andrew's wrestling with how he should be honest in going through certain border checkpoints behind the Iron Curtain. I forget his framework. He tried to be honest in all times when he could. There was times he did not tell the whole truth.
It's like he didn't volunteer information.
Yeah. Those are somewhat different circumstances than our own interpersonal relationships.
It reminds me of the story too of Menno Simons was being chased and persecuted, and he's in the carriage riding from one city to another, and whoever came up behind him looking for him, and they stuck their head in the carriage, and they said, "Is Menno Simons in here?" And he was, and he stepped outside and looked around. No, he stepped outside and looked in and said, "Is Menno Simons in here?" Nope. Got back in and away they went. So that's not very honest. Okay, so is there a time then to withhold some truth? Is there ever a time for that?
It's protecting the purpose of the will of God. It seems like it's a different thing than protecting how you view me and what I truly have in my heart. It seems like there's a bit of a clarification there. Samuel, it was the purpose of God. He was protecting me. And he didn't want to give all information, like Brother Andrew as well. But I don't think Brother Andrew was the type to go to church and make it all sound good.
Yes, I agree with that. Protecting as if God can't protect himself, but he can, but protecting that, or protecting somebody else. If there's some words coming about somebody else and you know full well you know the whole story, there's a time not to give the whole story in order to protect somebody else.
I've got a little thing. It's a wise woman knows everything she says, but she doesn't say everything she knows. And I think for parents, your children ask you stuff. You don't unload everything you know on them. You answer appropriately to what they meant by that question. So that would be one example. But we do that all the time. Somebody asks me, they figure out I'm Amish Mennonite, and they say, what's that? And I'll ask a couple questions before I answer them, because depending on who it is, I'll say, well, Beachy Amish, and they ran off, and I give the detailed shop talk thing. Well, that might not be at all what they really want. You know what I mean? So I try to figure out and give the appropriate response. And so I think that's an answer to you, Deanna. When your children ask you stuff, you think carefully and give the wisest possible answer. Not everything you know that they ask.
Without the intention of deception.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, we're trying to be appropriate and wise in our answer, not just blurt everything out that we know. I mean, that's the way I justify myself.
I think that's fine.
I don't know if this verse would tie in with what we're just talking about. First thing in my mind was love covers multiple sins. Is there a time when because we care and love someone, we're careful in how we convey the facts that are there, not that we're trying to put something on carpet that we.
But you don't want to incriminate them even over something that's not what showing people.
Right.
Yeah. That's a good lead into the next thought, and that is what I'm about to communicate kind. So we just said, is it true? The second very simple principle is what I'm about to communicate kind. It said that people hear your words of truth, but they feel your words of kindness. Can any of you relate to that? You hear words of truth, but you feel words of kindness. That is so true. Ephesians 4:15 says, but speaking the truth in love, that is speaking truth in kindness, that you may grow up into him in all things, which is the head, even Christ. Proverbs 15:1, a soft answer turneth away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger. Ecclesiastes, the words of a wise man's mouth are gracious, but the lips of a fool will swallow up himself. It's possible to say words of truth to someone, but underneath there's an undercurrent of disgust or apathy or cynicism or something like that. A few different times when I thought of that we tend to be unkind in our words, and we would never say we're unkind, right? But a few ways that we tend to be unkind is when I'm defending myself or defending somebody else. It's my nature to rise up and to defend somebody. And when we do this, many times it's a reaction rather than a response, because it's usually immediate. And I speak from my own experience. When I defend, it's usually an immediate defense. And then I say things everywhere. They're rash words. They're built up in emotion and not thought through like they should be. And so they come across as unkind as I retaliate. But they're true, right? They're true. But the truth doesn't matter if they're not true. This is where written communication can be really dangerous. We would say things in an email or in a letter or in a text that I wouldn't have the nerve to say in person. I could type a scathing response to somebody and send it off because we reason, we say, well, it's up to them how they interpret it. And boy, isn't that the truth? You can read so much into what is written. I've gotten emails or I've gotten letters from people and I read it and I think, this could be taken several different ways. What do they actually mean by this? You don't have that context of their tone of voice or their body language or their raised eyebrows or their veins sticking out on their neck as they're yelling at you. You don't know you don't know what it is. And so it's hard to interpret correctly. It's hard to know if it's kind or if it's not. I'm finding out the best way to avoid making unkind remarks, and this is just my own tendencies and my own testimony. Maybe some of you can relate, but the best way to avoid making unkind remarks is just stop. Just stop. Take some time. Cool down a little bit. Swallow your pride. If you feel that you have been unfairly criticized, again, just stop and look at it. I think there's always an ounce of truth in criticism. They obviously saw something in your life. It's probably not accurate. It's probably not the whole story, but they saw something. So take that ounce of truth, take that criticism, apply it, change it, and move on. That makes it sound really easy, doesn't it? I know it's not that easy. But it's a good policy to think first, speak later. A rash decision or rash words are rarely good ones. Any thoughts as we think of kind or unkind words or communication?
I have a question. So, our lives intersect with other people's often. So, when I'm talking about my life, it also sometimes involves other people. At what point is it gossip? Or when is it okay to share? Because obviously you want to be kind to what you share.
Is it about me or somebody else? Because that makes a difference, right? No, that's a good question. So your question is, when does it become gossip and when is it information people need to know?
Yeah, which is, I'm talking about when it happens to involve someone else and, yeah.
You understand the question? What are your thoughts?
I think a good litmus test would be, is it something you would say, I think you started out with this, if the person was standing right there. And I often weigh, or try to weigh the things that I say is, if I would turn around and see that person standing in the doorway, would I be embarrassed, would I be ashamed for what I said? That has worked well when I remember to use that.
When I remember.
One thing I've had to learn is like how different people's expectations of privacy are. Like I have some friends who are honestly everything's an open book and they don't really care, and others honestly do care a lot more about something I wouldn't have thought of. Like it almost does have to be a conversation with the people that your lives intersect with, how much they care about how they're brought up in other conversations.
Aren't there different levels depending who you're speaking to? Like, I process by talking out loud, and so my husband pretty much gets my unfiltered mind all the time, and I'll just dump it out, and I know that he's a man I can trust, and he's not going to blow things around. I have a trusted friend that I many times go to, and if I can, I will try to avoid names and just someone to just help me process stuff. Sometimes I maybe can't avoid names because they may know something about it, but if I can, I'll just give the circumstance without the names. And so, but I know that they hear a lot of things I wouldn't tell to just anyone I meet. So I think there's different levels of, that works for me.
I think you're right. I think gossip is I don't want to say every time, but mostly we gossip for our good. We want to, gossip is usually negative. We're putting somebody down, and if we're not putting them down, we're lifting them up. And if we are putting them down, it's for the purpose of lifting ourselves up. So gossip is usually for our good, or to make people realize that we know a lot of stuff. We know about this stuff. Is that not true? That's why we gossip. And if our motive is actually to inform, or to get some input, or to get some counsel, I don't believe it's gossip then. Any other thoughts?
I always think too, am I part of the solution to this problem? Does it directly involve my community? If it does not, then I think we should limit ourselves to prayer. Maybe just for an example, maybe you're aware of a church that's going to perform well, but you're not attending that church. Is it beneficial for us to get involved in discussing the sides and the issues if we're not really part of the solution, if we're not thinking about moving to that group? Now, if my family member is thinking about moving to that group, now, to me, it's moved into a little bit of a different scenario where we might want to enlighten them or plug in somehow in a good way. But most of the time, that's not the case. Most of the time, we're just talking about the problem at the other group. And we're really not part of the solution or the problem. And I like to ask myself, am I actually part of the solution here? Because if not, I don't really need to get involved other than prayer. Keep us out of this.
I think sometimes we don't understand gossip isn't just the one who's saying. Gossip is also the fellow who's welcome. And like he's saying, it's not part of the problem or solution, but boy, we love this.
We'd love to hear.
That's a kind way to shut
I was just gonna go there. There was, this might be more of a Matthew 18 type thing, but somebody came to a church leader one time and was, because church leaders are the ones to deal with this, right? Not other. They came to the church leader and they said, this person is doing this and this and this and this. And the leader wisely said, all right, when shall I set up a meeting for you? Like, go talk to them about it. That's what you need to be doing. Yeah, I think what you said, Val, is a good, said kindly. Yeah, go, have you talked to this person about it? Have you, or if you show, maybe this isn't kind either, but if you show disinterest in the conversation, they might lose interest in sharing it with you.
Back to the original question, and in light of some of what was already shared, I appreciate the thoughts, and I know from personal experience, there are times when you go through difficult experiences where it involves a lot of people that you're working with. There's times to have, just as you're processing, there's times for sharing, and I believe as husband and wives, put a bunch of time in your bedroom, wherever you're talking to this stuff, processing it. Or there's a friend that you confide in. But then there's also a point in time where it's kind of like, there's also a time just to move on. There's the issue, we talk through it, pray about it, but then at some point we just need to lay it down and move forward. And start focusing on how can we build up, we can't wallow in that difficulty or in that problem circle that we're in just for the most part.
That's true. Did you ever notice that people won't hear what you have to say if it's not said kindly? Have you ever been involved in a conversation with someone where they are just let's just say it's a half an hour long conversation, and they're talking about you, they're saying, oh, we appreciate how you do this and this and this, and you do well at this, and it's all good things. And it's good, you're hearing it, and it's sounding good, and they throw in this 2-second remark that is maybe not hurtful, but it's a negative part of the conversation. So 2 seconds out of a half an hour, and you go away from that conversation, what do you remember? All you think about is that 2 seconds, right? Or maybe not all, but the huge majority of that conversation is narrowed down to those 2 seconds of unkindness. So people, you'll damage the whole conversation by 2 unkind words. Kindness in a conversation relaxes the atmosphere, in a conversation can be much more productive. And I think there's an art to this, in confronting somebody, which needs to be done in life, as you confront people with truth. If it can be done kindly, it will go over so much better. The last principle here, so is it kind? Is it true? Is it kind? And now lastly, is what I'm about to say, is it necessary? And we've looked at that this morning as well. I don't know if you run into this with your children or not, but they'll say something about somebody else, and you'll say, that wasn't very kind. They say, yeah, but it was true. I don't know if you've ever faced that, or maybe not with your children, maybe somebody else. That wasn't kind, yeah, but it was true. Well, maybe, but was it necessary? It may have not been kind, it may have been true, but was it necessary? This thing of saying things that aren't necessary. How many of you are kind of introverted, timid people? All right, there's a lot more of you, because if you truly are, you wouldn't have raised your hand. If you are, this could scare you into perpetual silence, and that's not good either. Because there is a time to speak, and there is a time to say things. I don't think I'll take the time to do that. I have several verses here, probably 8 or 10 verses throughout Scripture. And Scripture speaks a lot to speaking when it's necessary, or the value of good words, or not speaking when it's What's not necessary? We talked earlier about true words come from a true heart, unkind words come from an unkind heart, right? Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. The same is true with unnecessary words. Unnecessary words come from a careless heart, a heart that doesn't take time to just care. Is what I'm saying helpful? Is it building? Is it encouraging? Any thoughts on unnecessary words?
Maybe just another thought, maybe it has to do with just gossip and some of that too, but I think, be careful not to label people. It's one thing to reflect information, or this is what happened, or, just more facts of a situation, whether it be, church or people, but when you start labeling these people as liars or thieves, or, it gets a little bit more dramatic, and I think just be more careful with facts and not labeling people. That doesn't promote good feelings.
Any other thoughts? Words at this point are necessary, just in case you were concerned about that. I was just challenged as I looked at this again, the tremendous power of words and what we say. I could take you to a place right now where someone said something, probably in passing, but they said it to me that was it was hurtful. I can remember the exact words, I can remember exactly where I was. Can any of you do that? Go to a place where somebody said something hurtful to you, and it sticks with you. It has a powerful effect on us. I can take you to another place where somebody said something that just was so encouraging. It's such a blessing to me. That just overwhelmingly kind words. I can take you to a place there. Can any of you do that? Go to a place where people have said, words are powerful. And what we communicate is powerful. And if you think about what you're saying about other people, or to other people, about other people, the tremendous blessing that can be. Or the things that you say quietly to other people about other people that are unkind, the tremendous detriment that can be just to their character, tearing down their character. Is it necessary to do that? Proverbs 6, verses 2 and 3 says, Thou art snared with the words of thy mouth. Thou art taken with the words of thy mouth. Do this now, my son, and deliver thyself. When thou art come into the hand of thy friend, go, humble thyself, and make sure thy friend. If you realize something you've said has been hurtful, go and take care of it. Take care of it right away, because you're just creating a bigger mess, a bigger problem by what we've said. Any thoughts as we wrap this up today? Throw that in on the end. Get some advice from somebody, some counsel, because we're unbalanced people. We forget so quickly. I've heard us described as leaky vessels. We forget so quickly we're unbalanced. So, yeah, get that response. Run it by somebody that can honestly tell you. They might say it's not worth it. Don't bother. Or they might adjust your response. Something like that. That's good advice.
I was just sitting here thinking about speaking in person face to face versus texting or emailing or whatever. The thing with speaking face, I like to speak face to face with people, but you don't have 10 seconds of silence is a little awkward. So you gotta come up with something. And then later you say, left that out. Whereas when you're writing it out, you got time to think about what you want to say. And let it sound kind of like that. So that would be the advantage of something.
Yeah, that's true. More time to think through a response, to avoid rash words.
Golden standard in reading the New Testament, is it edifying, is it minister grace to the hearers? That shoots down a lot of things that we would like to see.
So when you communicate, is it true? Is it kind? And is it necessary? I'd like to leave you with this verse. Let your speech always be with grace, seasoned with salt, that you may know how you ought to answer every man.